My parents have always looked down on me, my interests, my career. None of it ever felt good enough for them. Then came the message. Sorry, sweetheart. No room for you at the Silver Ridge retreat this time. But the guest list had 124 names. Cousins, family, friends. Even my dad's old college roommate. That's when it hit me, this couldn't go on. I was done staying quiet. Done proving I was worth a seat. What I did next caught my entire family off guard. And they showed up at my door, full of questions and disbelief. My name's Lauren Mitchell, I'm 33, and last month I got the same message I've come to expect every year. For years, I've been the one they always seem to forget, no matter how well I was doing in my design career. At some point, the pattern stopped feeling accidental. It became clear I was being left out on purpose. But this year I made a promise to myself things were going to change. Before I dive deeper into what happened, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the odd one out in your family. You'll want to hear how this unfolds. The Silver Ridge retreat wasn't just a trip, it was a tradition my grandparents, June and Walter Mitchell, started nearly 40 years ago. When I was little, Grandpa Walter would tell magical stories about how he and Grandma fell in love with the crystal clear lake and towering pines during their honeymoon. This place, he used to say with a warm smile, will be our family's special spot. And he meant it. When I was 6, they bought a beautiful lakefront property to make it real. That place became the backdrop for so many memories growing up. Every summer, my siblings and I would rush down to the private dock, our laughter bouncing off the water. My oldest brother Evan would plan these elaborate scavenger hunts across the 10 acres. Clara and Sophie, my older sisters, would help Grandma cook enormous meals in the big rustic kitchen. The twins, Noah and Dean, were always up to something, usually climbing trees they probably shouldn't. And little Ivy, the youngest, stuck to Grandpa's side as he worked in the garden. But it was me Grandpa Walter took on what he called artist walks. He noticed my love for drawing long before anyone else did. You see the world differently, Lauren, he'd tell me, watching me sketch the mountain reflections in the lake. He even set up a tiny easel for me on the wraparound porch. Sometimes we'd just sit there for hours, him quietly beside me, gently encouraging as I painted. Your art will take you far, he'd say. Don't ever let anyone convince you it's not worth pursuing. So when I announced that I'd be going to art school instead of following the business path my parents picked out, my grandparents were the only ones who supported me. My dad, Thomas Mitchell, CEO of a regional banking company, didn't even try to hide how unimpressed he was. Artists don't pay mortgages, he declared one evening at dinner, and as always my mother Elaine, his constant echo, just nodded along. The summer after my second year of college, both of my grandparents passed away just months apart. Their loss left a huge emptiness in the family, but even in their absence they made sure the Silver Ridge home would remain part of our lives. They left the property to my parents, along with a letter asking that the family gatherings continue every year. And the tradition did go on, though the feeling changed. Once my parents took over the planning, those fun, laid-back gatherings slowly turned into something more formal. Guest lists expanded beyond our family to include my dad's business partners and my mom's social circle. What had once been about genuine connection turned into more of a show and tell. Even though my parents clearly didn't support my career choice, I kept pushing through art school. While others were out partying, I was working late nights on freelance graphic design projects. By the time I graduated, I had both an impressive portfolio and a growing list of clients. Today, I run a thriving design studio, working with everyone from new tech startups to high-end brands. But none of that ever seemed to matter to my parents. The first time I was left out of the retreat was 4 years ago. I got a text 2 weeks before the trip. We're keeping it small this year, just immediate family. Not enough space. Maybe next time. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself maybe they really were scaling back. Maybe they just wanted some quiet time with my siblings. I told myself it was fine. Even though that night was harder than I expected, I barely slept. The truth came out on social media. Photos showed not just my siblings but extended relatives, family, friends, and even a few people I didn't recognize, nearly 58 guests in total. When I casually brought it up to my sister Clara, she got defensive. Mom and Dad just assumed. You'd be too busy with work. You're always working. Each of my siblings has their own unique relationship with our parents. Evan, the oldest at 39, followed in Dad's footsteps and went into banking. He lives just a few blocks from our parents with his wife and 3 kids. He's the favorite, can do no wrong. Clara, 37, is married to a plastic surgeon and has fully embraced the polished life our mother always wanted. The twins, Noah and Dean, both 35, are lawyers working at the same top-tier firm, Dad's pride and joy. Sophie, who's 31, became a pediatrician and married another doctor, another gold star in our parents' book. Ivy, the youngest at 29, is a teacher and married her college sweetheart, who now works in finance. And then there's me, 33, unmarried, no kids, and running a creative business, and my father's words, I don't have a real job. To them, I've always been the odd one out, the one who didn't quite follow the expected path. And for 3 years in a row after that first time, the same pattern repeated. Each year I'd get that same message about limited space, and each year I'd see pictures proving otherwise that I acted like it didn't bother me. I poured my energy into growing my business that I told myself it didn't matter. But deep down it always did. But this year was different. I wasn't expecting what I stumbled across while casually scrolling through Instagram one evening in early June. There it was, my brother Noah had posted a photo of the printed guest itinerary for the upcoming retreat. His caption read, "Getting excited for the biggest family gathering yet." I zoomed in on the picture, and right there at the top, 124 confirmed guests. A full schedule of group activities was listed underneath. 124 people. Yet somehow still no space for me. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I counted the names I could make out, even though the photo was a little blurry. All 6 of my siblings were listed, along with their spouses and kids. I spotted cousins I hadn't seen in ages, my mom's sister and her entire family, even my dad's old college roommate and his wife. Everyone had a place except me. Trying to keep my tone light, I sent Noah a quick message. "Retreat looks amazing. Huge group this year." He responded almost immediately. "Yeah, gonna be epic. Mom and Dad really went all out." I replied, trying to sound casual. "Wow, 124 people. Must be using every inch of the property. How do you know the head count?" His answer hit me hard. "Dad's been stressing about fitting everyone. Had to rent 2 houses nearby just for overflow." That stopped me cold. They'd rented extra space, yet still told me there wasn't room. So much for the not enough space excuse. I put my phone down and walked over to the window. Outside, the Portland skyline stretched out in front of me, but my eyes were blurred with tears. This wasn't about space. It never had been. The moment hit me like a wave. I felt overwhelmed, like the weight of everything had finally hit me. I sat quietly by the window trying to process everything. For nearly an hour I couldn't bring myself to move. My mind raced through all the subtle ways I'd been pushed aside over the years, like the time my art won a national competition, and my parents didn't come to the ceremony, because one of the twins had a baseball game, or the Christmas when everyone unwrapped thoughtful gifts, and I got a generic gift card. The family photos where I was always at the edge, easy to crop out. When I finally had the strength to get up, I called my best friend Nina. We'd met in art school and had leaned on each other through everything. She picked up on the second ring. "They did it again," I said, my voice cracking. "The retreat?" she asked softly. 124 people, Nina. They even rented extra places to fit everyone. Her response was quiet but firm. "That's not just hurtful, that's intentional." Am I overreacting? I asked, my throat tight. Maybe there's some explanation. "No," Nina cut me off gently. "This isn't about space. It feels like a subtle message they've sent for years." Deep down I already knew she was right. My parents had never truly accepted my decision to build a life that didn't match their expectations. Even knowing that, the hurt didn't go away. That night, my mind flooded with memories of family events where I'd been made to feel small. Like the Thanksgiving where my dad introduced each sibling with their job title. But when it came to me, he simply said, "Still doing her art thing." Or the Mother's Day brunch when my mom beamed about wanting more grandkids, then turned to me and said, "Well, you'll need to find a husband first." Always those little remarks, quiet nudges reminding me that I didn't quite fit their mold. Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, replaying old conversations and picturing moments I wished I'd handled differently. At around 2:45 a.m., I called Clara. She just had a baby, so I knew she'd probably be awake. "Did you know I wasn't invited to Silver?" I asked her right away. There was a pause. "Mom said you were probably busy with work." Did anyone actually ask me if I was? Lauren, you know how it is. Mom and Dad organized the guest list. They invited over 100 people. They rented extra properties, Clara. Another pause. A longer one. Well, they don't really get your lifestyle, she said gently. Maybe if you made more of an effort. My lifestyle? I repeated. You mean the design studio I built from the ground up? The awards I've won? The fact that I support myself doing something I love? That's not what I meant, she said quickly. You've always been different. Being different doesn't mean I should be left out of the family. Maybe call Mom tomorrow, Clara offered. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. But I didn't respond. Because I knew it wasn't. It wasn't a mix-up. It was a pattern. And I'd been letting it happen. The next morning, sunlight poured through my apartment windows as I made coffee. It caught on the awards hanging on my walls, client testimonials, design trophies, reminders of everything I'd built. I had created something meaningful. Something that honored my grandparents' belief in me. But all this time, I'd been chasing validation from people who were never going to give it. A new thought began to take shape, not about forcing my way back into the retreat or begging for a seat at their table, but about starting something of my own. My first instinct was raw frustration. I considered reaching out, but knew it wouldn't lead to real understanding. I imagined posting the truth online, sharing it with our whole extended family, even showing up uninvited at Silver Ridge, just to make a point. But as I sipped my coffee and glanced at the photo of my grandparents on my desk, I knew none of that would honor who I am, or who they were. Believe people when they show you who they are, my grandmother used to say. And my parents had shown me again and again. No amount of explaining or pleading would change that. Instead of letting that pain turn into bitterness, I reached out to Landry, my former professor, now a mentor I deeply trust. Over video chat, I told her everything. My voice cracked in places, but I didn't hold back. I don't know what to do with all these feelings, I admitted. I can't keep pretending it doesn't affect me. She adjusted her signature red glasses and leaned in closer. You're a creator, Lauren. That's what you do, she said gently. When others tear down, you build. When they exclude, you include. When they shrink, you expand. I blinked unsure. What are you saying? If I were you, she said, smiling slightly, I'd take all of this and turn it into something powerful. Something that honors your grandparents and reminds you exactly what you're capable of. I started browsing luxury rentals near Silver Ridge, just out of curiosity at first. If my family could rent out extra homes, why couldn't I? It wasn't about competing, but suddenly, the thought of creating something for myself, my own version of a retreat, felt empowering. That's when I came across it, Willow Pines Retreat. A breathtaking property only 20 minutes from my family's place. 6 bedrooms, sweeping lake views, private beach access, and incredibly, it was available for the exact week of the family gathering. The price tag definitely gave me pause. But I'd been saving up for a condo down payment, and for the first time, this felt more important. The following day, I had lunch with my client Monica, who runs a successful event planning business. I designed her branding and website the year before, and we'd grown close since then. You're actually going to do it? She asked, wide-eyed, after I explained my idea. Not just any retreat, I said, feeling the energy build. A creative minds retreat, something centered around artists, designers, creatives, people who understand what it's like to build something from nothing. I imagined hands-on workshops, great food, outdoor adventures, all the warmth and fun my grandparents' gatherings used to have before they turned into my parents' networking events. Monica lit up. I love it. And I want to help. Planning beautiful events is literally my job. We spent the whole afternoon sketching out ideas. Monica offered suggestions for chefs she'd worked with who could prepare incredible meals. I began thinking about artists and creatives who could lead workshops and bring fresh inspiration. We started outlining the full experience: sunset yoga on the deck, boat rides across the lake, scenic hikes, evening bonfires with music and storytelling. You'll need a website, Monica noted, and a social media page to build the vibe, make it feel special, exclusive. That I can definitely handle, I said, already picturing the layout in my head. Over the next few days, I requested 2 weeks off from my design studio and shifted a good portion of my savings to cover the estate deposit. Then I got to work designing a digital invitation that felt elevated and inspiring. Creating the guest list took thought. Nina, of course, was the first person I added. Then I thought of other close friends from art school and the design world. Some clients had become good friends over the years, so I added them too. Even my old college roommate and her husband made the list. After some hesitation, I also sent invitations to Sophie and Evan. They were the only two siblings who had occasionally supported my work, and this felt like an opportunity to extend a bit of peace. With each name I added, I felt a growing sense of excitement. These were people who accepted me exactly as I am, people who valued my accomplishments instead of dismissing them. They made space for me in their lives without conditions. I built the retreat website with care, featuring beautiful photos of the estate, detailed descriptions of the activities, and short bios for each workshop leader. I also launched private social media pages so attendees could stay in the loop. Everything had the kind of polish and design flair that helped me build my name in the industry. Still, in the quieter moments, doubts crept in. What if no one came? What if it looked like I was just trying to recreate a family I didn't have? What if this ended in financial stress and embarrassment? But whenever those worries surfaced, I reminded myself why I was doing this. For my own sense of dignity. For the power to choose how I responded. To stop waiting for someone else's approval and start building something that reflected me. I couldn't change my parents' choices, but I could choose mine. And I decided to respond by creating something meaningful. 2 weeks after Noah's Instagram post, I had 26 confirmed guests, set for the exact same week as my family's. Sophie responded with genuine excitement. "This sounds amazing, Lauren. Way more my vibe than the usual formal family thing." Evan declined kindly. He said he couldn't miss the retreat with his kids, but he appreciated being invited. As I finalized everything, I felt something I hadn't felt about my family in a long time. Not frustration or sadness, but clarity. A grounded sense of purpose. For once, I wasn't reacting to being left out. I was choosing to create a space where I truly belonged. Booking Willow Pines Retreat was just the first step. Making it into the retreat I envisioned took a lot more work. The house itself was incredible, a sleek, modern structure with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sparkling lake. The kitchen was a chef's dream, the decks were massive, and it even had its own dock with 2 boats ready to use. But to turn it into the kind of experience I wanted, I had to get into the details. Monica became my planning partner, using her connections to secure vendors at great rates. We found a catering team that specialized in farm-to-table meals, scheduled daily cleaning services, and hired a photographer to capture the entire experience. "People need to see what you're building," Monica told me. "Not just your family, everyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong." After my client work each day, I spent my evenings planning the retreat, coordinating with speakers, finalizing activity lists. Elise, a well-known ceramic artist, agreed to lead a pottery workshop out back. Julian, a nature photographer, offered to host early morning photo walks. Nina would lead a creative journaling session. I wanted this retreat to reflect everything my grandparents stood for. Creativity, connection, joy, and realness. I thought about how Grandpa Walter would set up stargazing nights on the dock, telling stories about constellations as we snuggled under blankets. How Grandma June would arrange wildflowers in jars, placing them all over the house. It wasn't about spending big, it was about creating moments that felt intentional and full of heart. As the event drew closer, the financial strain definitely started to show. Payments were due, and I needed more income to stay on track. So I took on extra client work, late nights, long hours, just to keep everything afloat. I managed to fund the retreat without wiping out my entire savings, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't second-guess myself along the way. At times, I wondered, was I being too dramatic? Was I really pouring thousands into this just to make a point about years of feeling left out? But then I'd get a message from one of the guests, full of excitement about the trip, and I'd feel grounded again. This wasn't about getting even. It was about bringing happiness into a space where there had once been silence in pain. 1 week before the retreat, everything nearly unraveled. The catering company called to tell me they'd double-booked and couldn't handle our event anymore. I sank to the floor of my apartment, surrounded by welcome basket items, trying not to cry from the frustration. "I can't believe this is happening," I said to Nina over the phone. "What am I going to do? 26 people are expecting amazing meals for 5 days. And now I don't even have a chef." "Breathe," Nina said gently. "We can fix this. Let me make a few calls." Within just a few hours, she connected me with Sophia, a personal chef trained at the Pacific Culinary School. She happened to be between jobs and was free for the entire week. After going over the menus I'd planned, Sophia suggested a few changes that would actually elevate the meals. What started as a near disaster turned into an unexpected upgrade. The day before everyone was set to arrive, I loaded up my car and drove to Silver Ridge, every inch packed with supplies. As I pulled into the circular driveway of the Willow Pines retreat, the late afternoon sun lit up the property in a golden glow. For a moment, I just sat there, completely overwhelmed by everything I'd pulled off, and everything that was about to unfold. The property manager showed me around, explained how everything worked, and handed me the keys. After he left, I stood alone in the great room, looking out through massive windows at the lake beyond. This place was mine, at least for the next week, and I had full control over the energy that would fill it. That afternoon, I dove into final preparations. For each guest, I crafted a welcome basket using large market totes. Inside, I placed handmade soaps, small bottles of Oregon wine, gourmet chocolates, personalized journals with the retreat logo I designed, and handwritten notes to thank each person for being part of my life. For Sophie's basket, I tucked in a childhood photo of us painting on Grandpa's porch. Just a little memory we'd once shared. As I placed the baskets in each room, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Hope you're having a great summer, honey. Anything fun planned for next week?" Her text confirmed what I'd already suspected. They didn't realize I knew about the family trip I wasn't invited to. They still assumed I was in the dark, that I'd just go along with their version of events. Instead of replying, I snapped a photo of the sunset from the deck and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Let the creative minds retreat begin." I knew my siblings followed me. I knew word would get around. And honestly, for once I wasn't worried about their reactions. That I was done pretending I didn't notice, done pretending I wasn't hurt. It was time to stop hiding. I was finally ready to be seen. The next day, just before noon, the first guests started to arrive. Nina showed up in her vintage Volkswagen, followed closely by Julian and his partner Aaron. Their reactions the moment they walked in made every dollar spent and every late night feel completely worth it. "Lauren, this is unbelievable," Nina gasped, looking around at the high ceilings and the lake view. "You've really outdone yourself." As the afternoon went on, more guests trickled in, some of whom I hadn't seen in years. Each reunion felt warm and real. Everyone admired the house, the welcome baskets, and the detailed schedule I'd prepared for the week. With every arrival, the energy in the house grew exactly how I'd imagined. Creative, open, and joyful. Sophia showed up with her team and got started on our welcome dinner. Meanwhile, I gave guests a tour, helped them settle into their rooms, and made sure everyone felt comfortable. By sunset, all 26 participants had arrived, including my sister Sophie. She wrapped me in a tight hug and whispered, "This is incredible. I had no idea you were planning something like this. Did anyone else in the family see my Instagram post?" I asked softly. Sophie looked a little unsure. "Mom asked if I knew anything about it. I just told her I'd be seeing you this week." I gave her a small nod, grateful for her keeping things quiet. "Thanks for coming. It means a lot." That first dinner? It surpassed anything I had imagined. Sophia prepared a stunning multi-course meal using ingredients from small valley growers. Each dish was like art on a plate. We ate at a long table on the deck, string lights glowing overhead, with conversation flowing as easily as the wine. At one point, I stood up to officially welcome everyone. Looking around at the people who had shown up for me, my heart felt full. To creativity, to connection, and to creating our own traditions, I said, raising my glass. As the night went on, I noticed people snapping photos and posting them online. At by morning, my phone was filled with notifications, not just from retreat guests, but from family members who had finally noticed what I was doing. Noah was the first to text, "That place looks amazing. What's this retreat about?" Then Clara messaged, "Just a heads up. Mom's asking why Sophie's with you instead of at the family gathering." I didn't rush to reply. There were more important things to focus on, like starting the morning off with sunrise yoga on the deck, led by Aaron, who's actually a certified instructor. Afterward, we had fresh fruit and homemade pastries for breakfast. Julian took a group out on a photography hike, while Elise set up pottery wheels on the patio for the rest of us. I was so caught up in the day's activities that I barely checked my phone. But when I finally did, the messages had tripled. My brother Dean had written, "Saw your posts, looks amazing. Didn't realize you had something planned this week." The message behind Dean's text was obvious. He was wondering why he hadn't been invited. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on the third day of the retreat. We had just wrapped up a boat tour of the lake and were making our way back to the dock when I noticed a refined older woman waiting nearby. It took me a second, but then I realized it was my grandmother's sister June, the very woman I'd been named after. Great Aunt June. I called out, rushing to help her up. What are you doing here? I saw pictures of this place on that Instagram app, she said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. Recognize the view. I was supposed to go to your parents' event, but this looked a whole lot more interesting. At 86, Great Aunt June had always been the one who went her own way. She built a life traveling the world as a journalist when most women of her time were expected to stay home. She'd been close to my grandparents and had always taken a special interest in my creative path. That night, once most guests had headed to bed, June and I sat out on the deck together, sharing a bottle of her favorite scotch. Out of the blue, she said, "Your grandparents would be so proud of you." She motioned to the retreat setting. Not just for this place but for staying true to yourself, even with Thomas and Elaine always pushing back. You know about that? I asked, caught off guard. Of course I do, she said without hesitation. I've watched them sideline you for years. Walter and June saw it too, it broke their hearts. Hearing that from someone who had loved and understood my grandparents hit me in a way I didn't expect. Emotion caught me off guard. I've tried so hard to make them proud, I admitted. Some people's approval just isn't worth chasing, June said firmly. Your grandparents got it. They knew that creativity isn't just about having a job, it's a way of experiencing the world. They saw that spark in you right from the start. That conversation brought me back to my purpose. It reminded me why I created this retreat in the first place. It wasn't about proving anything to my parents. It was about honoring the parts of me they had always overlooked. The next afternoon, we were sitting down for lunch when my phone rang. It was my mom. I let the call go to voicemail, but she immediately tried again. And again. By the third call, I excused myself from the table and picked up. Lauren, where are you? Her tone was tight, carefully measured. June was supposed to arrive at the family event yesterday, but we haven't heard from her. She's here, Mom, I said. With me? There was a long pause. What do you mean with you? Where exactly is here? I'm hosting a retreat this week, I explained. Great Aunt June decided to join us instead. You're in Silver? The disbelief in her voice was almost laughable. But we told you there wasn't enough room. I know what you told me, I cut in, keeping my voice steady. And I also know you invited 124 people and rented extra homes. So I made my own space. Another long silence followed. We need to talk about this, she said at last. Your father and I are coming over. Before I could say anything, she ended the call. I returned to the group, trying to keep it together, but Nina immediately picked up on my energy. My parents are on their way, I said quietly. They just found out where I am. She gave my hand a squeeze. We've got you. All of us. An hour later, their silver Mercedes rolled up the driveway. I stepped outside to meet them, not wanting to interrupt the pottery workshop happening in the great room. My mother looked me over from head to toe, then turned her attention to the house behind me. Her expression was unreadable. Lauren, what exactly is going on here? I'm hosting a creative retreat, I said calmly. For friends and colleagues. Since I wasn't included in the family trip, I made other plans. Not included? My father's brow furrowed. We just said there wasn't enough space. For one person, I finished for him. While you invited 124 others and rented additional homes. Let's not pretend this was about space, Dad. My mom's face flickered between defensiveness and discomfort. We figured you'd be busy with work. You're always so focused on your projects. My work isn't just a hobby, I said. It's my career. A successful one. And one you and Dad have never taken seriously. The words I'd held back for years finally came out, not as a dramatic speech but as simple truth. For 4 years, you've left me out of family gatherings. It often felt like my accomplishments weren't taken seriously while constantly uplifting my siblings. You've made it very clear where I stand in this family. My dad opened his mouth to respond, then fell silent, his gaze drifting to the house. Through the tall windows, guests could be seen laughing and creating pottery with Elise. These people, who are they? He asked quietly. They're the ones who value me, I said. Friends. Colleagues. Clients. People who make room for me in their lives. And Sophie here too, I added. She chose this over your event. My mom's face shifted when I said that, her expression softening just a little. Lauren, if you felt left out, you could have said something, she said. Would it have changed anything? I asked gently. For the first time in my adult life, my father didn't have an answer. He looked around, taking in everything: the house, the guests, the atmosphere. All of it built from the space they had refused me. Maybe we should talk privately, he offered at last. No, I replied, my voice steady. I'm in the middle of hosting something meaningful. My guests deserve my time. If you'd like to stay for dinner, you're welcome. But as guests, not as parents showing up to correct me. They exchanged a glance, half surprised, half unsure of what to make of this version of me. Confident. Grounded. No longer asking for approval. Dinner's at 7, I said, and turned to head back inside. Lauren, my father called after me. I paused, but didn't turn around. This is impressive what you've done here. It wasn't an apology, but coming from Thomas Mitchell, it carried weight. I gave a single nod and walked into the house, where my chosen family was waiting. My parents did attend dinner that night. At first. They were stiff and visibly uncomfortable, but Great Aunt June's presence helped soften the tension. They met my friends, listened as others shared stories about my career, and witnessed the kind of respect I had earned in my world. By the end of the evening, something had shifted, not in a dramatic way, but enough to notice. As they were getting ready to leave, my mom said, "Next year we'll make sure there's space for you at the family retreat." I smiled politely, offering no promises. I had built something far too valuable to set aside. Over the next couple of days, messages from my siblings began trickling in. The reactions were mixed. Dean seemed hurt that he hadn't been invited. Ivy was just confused. Clara rushed to defend our parents, while Evan sent a kind message acknowledging the family hadn't always been fair to me. The most unexpected reaction came from Noah. He showed up unannounced on our last full day. I told Mom and Dad I needed a break from the chaos, he said, but really I wanted to see what you've created. It looked incredible online. I gave him a tour, introduced him to my friends, and invited him to our closing dinner. As I watched him talk with my creative circle, I caught glimpses of the curious younger brother he used to be. Before the pressure of our parents' expectations had narrowed his path. As the retreat drew to a close, its success was undeniable. Guests were already asking about the next one. Professional connections had been made that could lead to real collaborations. But more than anything, I had proved to myself that I could create meaningful traditions on my own terms. The final morning of the retreat arrived with a bittersweet feeling. Guests were enjoying a relaxed breakfast on the deck when I spotted a familiar SUV pulling into the driveway. My parents had returned, this time with Clara. I stepped outside to meet them, determined to hold on to the boundaries I'd worked hard to set. "We thought we'd help you pack up," my mom offered, her casual tone not quite landing. "That's not necessary," I replied. "We've got it covered." Clara stepped forward. "Lauren, can we talk privately?" I hesitated, then nodded, leading them to a quiet corner of the garden. The morning sunlight filtered through the pines, casting soft shadows on the ground between us. "This has gotten out of hand," Clara started. "They've been hurt by all this tension." "That wasn't my goal," I said truthfully. "I just decided I wasn't going to accept being left out anymore." "There was a misunderstanding about space," my mom began. "Mom," I interrupted gently but clearly, "we both know it was never just about space." My father, unusually quiet until now, finally spoke. "You're right." The words lingered between us. My mom looked at him, surprised. "You're right," he repeated, meeting my gaze. "We focus more on traditional paths and overlooked yours. We kept you out because we were disappointed that you didn't follow the path we hoped for." As painful as it was to hear, there was something honest and freeing about it. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. He glanced toward the house. "This what you've built, with all these people who clearly admire you. It made me realize we were wrong." My mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We didn't understand your world, Lauren. It seems so uncertain compared to your siblings' choices." "You never tried to understand," I said. "You never came to my shows, never asked about my clients, never celebrated my wins." "You're right about that too," my dad admitted. And then after a pause he added, "I'm sorry." Coming from Thomas Mitchell, those words were rare, almost unheard of. I felt something tight in my chest slowly begin to ease. "I can't say everything will change right away," he continued, "but I'd really like to try. I want to understand your world better." Clara glanced between us, clearly uneasy with his sudden vulnerability. "So will you come to the family retreat next year?" she asked, trying to move things forward. I took a moment to consider. "I'm not sure. I might host another retreat like this. It's been healing. Maybe we can coordinate dates," my mom suggested. "So there's no conflict. You could go to both, or at least part of each." It was a small offer but a sincere one. "I'll think about it," I said. Just then, Nina appeared at the garden's edge. "Sorry to interrupt, but we're ready for the closing circle when you are." "I'll be right there," I told her, then turned back to my family. "You're welcome to join us for the closing circle if you'd like. but as participants, not just spectators. To my surprise, my father nodded. We'd like that. As we walked back toward the house, Clara whispered. Noah hasn't stopped talking about yesterday. He said it's the most relaxed he's felt in years. The closing circle was a tradition I'd borrowed from art school, a quiet, reflective time for people to share what the week had meant to them. We gathered in the great room, seated on cushions in a wide circle, each person taking turns to speak. When it came to my parents' turn, my father cleared his throat. I don't usually speak in public unless it's about quarterly projections, he joked, getting a few laughs. But I want to thank Lauren for including us. This has opened my eyes to a world I never really understood. Afterward, as guests began packing up and exchanging contact information, my parents pulled me aside. We'd love to have you over for dinner next week, my mom said. Just the three of us to talk more. I agreed but added, I need you to know something. I'm choosing to stay true to my path. That's not part of the deal. We know, my dad replied, once again surprising me. Maybe we're the ones who need to change. After they left, I joined my guests for one final lunch. Great Aunt June sat beside me, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and wisdom. You know, she said, sipping her iced tea, sometimes the family you choose ends up mattering more than the one you're born into. I looked around the table at the people who had shown up for me, who had celebrated and supported each other all week. I think you're right, I said. She gave my hand a gentle pat. But, she added, it's a beautiful thing when both can exist together. Give them a chance, Lauren, not for their sake but for yours. Throughout the afternoon, guests slowly packed their things and said their goodbyes. The house gradually fell quiet. Sophie was one of the last to leave, pulling me into a warm hug. This was transformative, she said. I've been so focused on living up to Mom and Dad's expectations, I forgot what it's like to just create, to play and connect in a real way. You're welcome at my table anytime, I told her. Noah had extended his spontaneous visit and helped me load the last of the supplies into my car. As we finished locking up the house, he turned to me. I'm sorry, Lauren. For what? I asked. For not realizing what you were going through. For going along with it. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and for a moment I didn't see the polished corporate lawyer our parents had shaped. I saw the little boy who once spent entire afternoons building sandcastles with me by the lake. Maybe we can all do better going forward, I offered. By sunset, I was alone again, standing on the deck of Willow Pine's retreat, watching the last of the golden light reflect across the water. The retreat had exceeded every expectation. Professionally, socially, and most of all, personally. I had turned exclusion into inclusion, rejection into creativity, and past hurt into something that felt like healing. I didn't know what the future would look like with my family. Years of old patterns couldn't be undone in one weekend. But for the first time in a long while, there seemed to be room, an opening to be seen for who I actually was, not who they once hoped I'd become. As I locked the door of the house for the last time, a deep sense of gratitude settled over me. Gratitude for my grandparents, who had always seen my creative spark. For the friends who supported this vision. And strangely, even for the exclusion because it pushed me to build something uniquely my own. Whatever came next, I held one truth close. I would never again shrink myself to fit into spaces too small to hold the fullness of who I am. The drive back to Portland gave me time to reflect. Winding down through the Silver Ridge foothills, each curve brought me closer to my everyday life, but with a new outlook. This retreat hadn't just been a one-week event. It had been a turning point. When I got home, my apartment felt different. Not in its layout but in its energy. This space, once filled with quiet frustration, now held the confidence of someone who had turned rejection into creation. I unpacked slowly, carefully. Each leftover welcome basket item, each printed itinerary, every group photo. They were more than souvenirs. They were proof of what I had built. The following day, guest messages started pouring in. One email after another expressed appreciation, described creative breakthroughs, and asked if there would be a retreat next year. Julian wrote that he'd landed a major photography show after showing his retreat photos to a gallery owner. Elise mentioned that 2 other attendees had commissioned large ceramic pieces from her. Nina called to say she'd already started a group chat. What began as a response to exclusion had become something alive on its own. A true community, a new tradition. A reminder that if no one offers you a seat, you can build your own table. The promised dinner with my parents happened the next week. I arrived at their home in Portland cautiously hopeful, but with firm boundaries in place. The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, decades of habits that didn't change overnight. Still, something felt different. My father asked about my business, real questions, ones that suggested he was actually curious. My mother showed me a ceramic bowl she bought from a local artist and asked what I thought of the glaze. Over dessert, my dad brought up the family retreat. I braced myself, expecting them to pressure me about attending. "We think it strayed from what your grandparents originally meant it to be," he said. "Too big, too formal, too much of a networking event." "Next year," my mom added, "we're planning to scale it down. Just immediate family like it used to be." I nodded, appreciating the sentiment but still unsure. "That sounds nice." Then my father cleared his throat. "We'd also like to come to your retreat next year. Not for the whole time, maybe just a day or two if that's all right. We want to see your world more clearly." I was caught off guard. Thomas and Elaine Mitchell, choosing to step into a space filled with artists, designers, and creatives? It wasn't exactly an apology for the past, but it was a step toward understanding. "I'd like that," I said. The weeks that followed brought different kinds of conversations with my siblings. Some were healing. Others remained tense. Sophie and I began meeting once a week for coffee, something we'd never done as adults. Evan invited me to his son's school art show. A small gesture that meant more than he knew. Noah called from time to time, asking questions about my work with what felt like genuine interest. Clara stayed defensive, still unwilling to acknowledge the dynamics that had left me on the outside. Dean and Ivy kept their distance, maybe unsure how to handle all the changes happening within the family. I came to accept these varied reactions. Each sibling had their own relationship with our parents and with me. I also started seeing a therapist. It was something I'd thought about for years but had always pushed aside for work. Dr. Whitaker helped me see the patterns I'd grown up with. How being the different one had both hurt and strengthened me. How chasing parental approval had motivated me, but also held me back. "The retreat," she said during one session, "was a pivotal moment. You stopped waiting to be included and created the space yourself. That's powerful." What surprised me most was the professional impact. Retreat participants had shared their experience online and in industry circles. That led to new clients, new opportunities to collaborate. My studio was even featured in a major design publication, with the retreat highlighted as an example of meaningful, creative community building. I started getting invitations to speak at design conferences, all centered around building creative communities. It was a path I hadn't expected but one that felt right. 3 months after the retreat, Great Aunt June called with news I hadn't seen coming. "I've been thinking about Walter and June's wishes for the Mitchell family lodge," she said. It was never meant to be a status symbol or a venue for networking. It was meant to nurture creativity and connection. "I know," I said quietly, remembering the days when my grandparents were still alive. "I've spoken to the family trust lawyer," she continued. "As the last surviving sibling, I do have some say in how the property is used. I've requested that 1 week each summer be set aside for a creative retreat, led by you." I was stunned. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Your grandparents saw your talent from the very beginning," June said gently. "This is exactly what they would have wanted." The trust lawyer confirmed the arrangement the following week. Surprisingly, my parents didn't push back. "Your retreat was impressive," my father said when I called to talk it over. "Maybe it's time the property was used for something meaningful again." As I began planning the next Creative Minds retreat, this time on my grandparents' cherished land, I found myself reflecting on everything the past year had brought. What had started from the pain of exclusion had led to something far greater than just being included in someone else's space. I had learned that sometimes rejection is actually redirection. That forging your own path can be more rewarding than walking someone else's. That chosen family can be just as powerful as biological ties, sometimes even more so. And most of all, I realized that my worth was never tied to my parents' approval or my siblings' acceptance. It had always existed in my creative expression, in my meaningful relationships, and in my willingness to stand in my truth. Things with my family weren't perfectly resolved. Deep-rooted patterns rarely change overnight. But there was movement. A new awareness. the possibility of something different. I had learned how to set boundaries without cutting people off, to create space for myself without slamming doors shut. Looking out the window of my Portland apartment at the city skyline, I found myself thinking about others who might feel unseen, overlooked, or pushed to the side by the very people who should value them most. And I thought about how this retreat had become more than just a response, it had become a blueprint. A way to turn rejection into creation, not resignation. Next year's retreat would be even more intentional, more welcoming, more creative. I opened my laptop and started jotting down ideas, feeling my grandparents' presence guiding every word. Because sometimes the most powerful response to being told there's no room for you is to build a space so full of life and purpose that others hope to be part of it. A space shaped not by resentment, but by self-worth. Not fueled by competition, but by generosity. That's exactly what I had done. And in the process, I didn't just shift how my family saw me. I reshaped how I saw myself. Have you ever been left out of a family event or made to feel like the outsider? How did you respond? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, please give it a like and subscribe for more journeys of healing, growth, and rediscovery. Just remember, your value isn't defined by those who fail to see it. It's defined by your courage to honor it anyway. Thank you for watching. And please share this with someone who might need to hear it today.